Hi, this is Justice. In this video, we're going to be talking about the 4 wet and the 4 dry media inside of Rebelle 5. So let's go through those 8 right now. The first one is oils and acrylics, express oils, watercolors, inks, pencils, pastels, markers, and airbrushes. Now, the 4 on the right are your 4 dry media. The 4 on the left are the 4 wet media. So let's lay down a little bit of oils. We're going to bring the loading up so we can see some of that thick impasto. Here we only have opacity. We don't have impasto. So here that looks like this. Watercolors. And this is going to diffuse. Inks. Pencils. Pastels. Let's bring the size of this up a little bit. Markers. Let's do the same thing with the size here. You can see how that layers and exactly what you would expect from an airbrush. Now, here is the difference. When I turn on Show Wet, you're going to notice that the options on the left all have a wet aspect, a wet component to them. That means that they are going to interact with wet or dry layer, wet all visible, dry the layer, and fast dry. These things here are extra properties in the wet category that are not a part of the dry media. If you pause diffusion, nothing is going to happen if you're using the dry media on the right. Now, all of these layers over here have wetness to them. Okay, so now if we add water to all of these, and I have in visual settings, I have re-wet and texture influence turned really high so that this is easier to see. Probably not how you're going to want to do it yourself. So now if I go over the top with some water, you're going to see even the dry media is affected by the water. It doesn't have its own water properties. All right, so you can see how that's interacting. We're going to turn off Show Wet. And let's go through some of the other properties of the individual media. Okay, so we're going to clear the layer. And let's zoom in and let's start with oils and acrylics. We're going to choose filbert. Let's make sure we have pigments turned on so that it's nice and pretty. Now, oils and acrylics have loading. And this is going to be the thickness of the paint. Let's start with oiliness turned all the way to 100. Let's bring it down. All right, let's take some watercolor. We're going to take some red and go right over the top so you can see how these different levels of loading and different levels of oiliness affect how the diffusion happens in between the wet media. And I think this one at the top left, I think it's just beautiful. I really like this. All right, let's move on. The oils and acrylics have 2 properties that are not anywhere else in Rebelle 5. They have multicolored brush here. And what you can see is the colors are mixing, and you have strands, striations of those different colors that start on the brush as you put it down, and then they slowly blend into the same color. Okay, so now let's go ahead and look at Dirty Brush. Now, Dirty Brush, as I use it, if I'm set at paint, you're not going to see the effect very much. If I'm set at blend, what you're going to see is this is going to sample colors from wherever the brush tip leaves the canvas. So what this is going to do is this is going to help us build a color set. We're going to be migrating from color to color, kind of like the mixed colors property. And so as we're painting, we're going to get some wonderful organic looking color mixing properties from these 2 options, multicolored brush and dirty brush. Okay, now as we transition to express oils, these are not there. This one is built for speed. And Express Oils has opacity. It does not have loading. It has no impasto depth. So keep in mind you're adjusting that there. All of these in the menus here have an option for pressure. Pressure, here all this is if your stylus does not have pressure, you can adjust what the pressure of the stylus does. You can adjust that manually over here in the pressure slider. We're not going to use that for this tutorial. Watercolors, if we have pigments, which is a Rebelle 5 Pro feature, and one of my favorite features added to any program ever, anywhere. I love pigments. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, these, if you have this turned on, it is going to supersede, it will encompass the blending modes that you find in watercolors. So you see transparent, semi-transparent, and opaque. Now, if you want, here, with the blending mode set to transparent, you're going to get sort of a multiplying effect, something that you see with a lot of watercolors in real life. Semi-transparent is going to be a hybrid that splits at the 50% mark, and opaque is going to put that color directly over the top, and it's going to retain that original color. And all of these are explained in more detail in some of the other videos on watercolor and the other videos on oils and acrylics. Okay, inks, you have the same thing. You have opacity, you have water levels. So let's put opacity all the way up. Let's look at the water levels. This is going to be similar for almost all of the wet media. So water here, 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 and here, and pigments turned on. And let's bring this down. You can see the one that has the highest level of water is actually balancing out the heavy water down here. So 100% water up here, 100% down here, they're going to be even. Whereas here, this was a lower surface level, and so the water just flowed right over the top. Same thing here. So keep that in mind that the water levels they have a plane, and if it's more water, it's going to go over the top. And let's take a look a little bit more extensively at the dry media. Now in the watercolors video and the oil and acrylics video, there was a lot of demonstration of all the brushes. That did not happen. And since we haven't done that for the dry media, I'm going to do some of that here. Okay, so let's shift to the pencils. And let's go ahead and zoom in, and we'll do some pencils here. By the way, all of these, if you have reset brush changes, if this is not grayed out, that means that some of these have some properties that need to be reset. So notice this is smaller. Let's reset this. So you can see right here, this one is grayed out, this one is not. And you can see how these look different here. Now, a lot of these pencils, as you tip the stylus, you're going to get some shading effects. So let's see, Pentel. I have the pulled string right here. I have that turned on this brush. You can see here, this is my favorite one. So I like the Pentel, and what I've done is I've turned on tilt. So I get a thin line and a thick line when I tilt the stylus. Charcoal. You can see some different lovely textures. I like these scratches a whole bunch. And digital. Let's look at the pastels. And I like these. These feel soft on the screen. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but they do. They feel soft and they feel lovely. They blend so nicely. Just almost creamy feeling. All right, so let's see, do something we can see here. I have a couple personal brushes, and I like to copy the fan brush into all the different media. Which, by the way, if you want to do that, just go here into this context menu, choose Copy Brush Preset. Let's say you wanted a marker, paste brush preset, and now we have fans in the markers. Now, all of the media have different backend settings, so keep that in mind if you're trying to replicate, but you can copy brushes from one to the next. All right, so markers, let's look here. I use these all the time. And airbrushes. Not a lot of surprises here. This behaves exactly like you'd think. All right, so that's a little demo of the dry media. Now, if you want more brushes for any of the media, you can click on this context menu, choose Get More Brushes. And then when you download these, you can actually just drag and drop those directly onto Rebelle 5. And then when you restart, those brushes will be accessible to you over here. As you can see, I have the Nut Cydia brushes. I have a feeling I'm butchering that name. All right, guys, that's it for the 4 wet and 4 dry media overview. If you have questions or comments, put it in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.